Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So as you have possibly guessed from the title and the thumbnail, in this video I'm going to be recommending some books that made me cry. So I spoke about this in a recent video. I really want to get back into making recommendations videos, and I was looking through videos that I've made in the past, and one of the very first videos that I made on my channel was a recommendations video where I talked about some sad books that had made me cry. So I figured now would be a good time to do a follow-up to that video where I talk about some more books that made me feel very emotional. I'm not going to link the original video because it was literally one of the first videos that I ever made on this channel, and it's a little bit embarrassing. It's still live if you did want to go and have a look at it, but yeah, we're going to be talking about some emotional books in this video, and I don't actually know how many books I have on this list, but I'm going to start with a book that I think is the most surprising book on this list because it's a thriller, and when I go into thrillers I don't expect them to be emotional, but I knew from the synopsis for this book that it was possibly going to be a lot more hard-hitting than the usual thriller. So the book that I'm going to be recommending first is 3 Hours by Rosamund Lupton. Like I said, this was very hard-hitting because it follows a few different characters and a few different perspectives, but it centres around a hostage situation at a school. It's set in England in rural Somerset during a blizzard, so you can possibly see actually from the front cover, but it's a very cold atmosphere, and I did think that the climate in this did add to that tension, and the suspense in this book was 10 out of 10. It's one of my favourite thrillers of all time because it puts you inside the minds of these characters and it makes you feel everything that they're feeling, and I felt so anxious throughout this book. It's not a long book either. How long is it? I think it's around 300 pages, so it's quite a quick read, mostly because it was so compelling and once I started it I couldn't put it down. But like I said, it is very hard-hitting, and you can probably guess from the fact that it's about a school shooting. It's not the easiest read at times, but it is one that I would recommend because it is one of my favourite thrillers of all time. I'm even hesitant to call it a thriller. I think that's the closest genre that I'd categorise it as, but yeah, it's a mix of a few different genres, but I loved the writing in this and I definitely need to pick up more books by this author. Next on my list is Single Bold Female by Laura Price. So this is contemporary fiction that follows a woman called Jess who's in her early 30s. I think she's around 30 or 31 at the start of the book, and her life is going pretty well. She has a great job where she's just been promoted and she's in a long-term relationship, so things are going really well for her. However, at the start of the book she's diagnosed with cancer and her life is turned upside down, as you can imagine. So the rest of the book follows her as she goes through treatment, and she deals with everything that comes with going through a cancer diagnosis, things like infertility and relationships breaking down. It's difficult to say that I enjoyed this book given what it's about, but this hit me on a very personal level. So for anyone who doesn't know, I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 28, so I've been in remission now for about 4 years, and I read this last year, so it'd been about 3 years since I was diagnosed. But the feelings that this book gave me, there was a lot that I could relate to, and it's the most accurate representation that I've come across of showing you how it feels and what it's like to go through cancer treatment. At times it did feel more like non-fiction, and I did some research at the time and I understand that the author went through cancer treatment herself and kept diaries of that time, which I believe she used as a basis for writing this book, and I could tell a little bit and it was a bit jarring at times, so that was my only small criticism. them, but overall this did affect me on a personal level, which is why I've included it in this video. It's not going to be a book for everyone, but I think if you are looking for a realistic account of the process of going through cancer treatment, then it is one that I would recommend. Next up we have two Kristin Hannah books. So Kristin Hannah is one of my favourite authors, actually. I was going to say favourite historical fiction authors, but actually two of her books, or one in particular, is a favourite book of all time, and that is The Nightingale, which I've heard rumours that this is being adapted into a movie. I don't know when that's actually going to happen, but I bought my mum a copy of this book for Christmas a couple of years ago because I had a feeling that she would like it too. But basically this is following two sisters during Nazi-occupied France in World War II. These two sisters are very different, but they both end up being part of the resistance in very different ways. The other Kristin Hannah book that I have on my list is The Four Winds, which I didn't enjoy as much as The Nightingale. However, this has really stuck with me. So this is set during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era in Texas, and we follow a woman who is faced with this really difficult decision on whether to take her family and travel across the country to try and find a better life, or stay in Texas and possibly starve, because they live on a farm and during that time period nothing was growing. I really liked the complicated mother-daughter relationship in this, and it was really interesting learning and reading about a time period that I didn't really know as much about. And I always enjoy reading historical fiction that's not set during World War II because that's typically what I've read the most of in the past. But yeah, I would really recommend Kristin Hannah's books. Even if you don't usually read historical fiction, I really want to read more of her books because I really like how breezy her writing style is. Next on my list is one of my favourite books of all time, and that is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachmann. So this was recently turned into a film where Tom Hanks played the lead role. I haven't seen it yet, but I do want to because I've heard good things. So this is following a man called Ove, surprisingly, who is a grumpy old man. He lives in this neighbourhood where most of his neighbours avoid him because he is big on complaining and they just see him as this lonely, grumpy old man. However, throughout this book, you learn a lot more about this guy and his life. You see flashbacks to the past, and essentially at the start of this book, he's struggling a lot with his mental health. So that's also quite a big theme in this book. I will say content warnings for suicidal thoughts. This family move in next door to him and they have, I think, two young kids. It's been a while since I read this, but it becomes very heartwarming, and I love Frederick Bachmann's writing style and how he discusses some very dark topics, but it's done in a more light-hearted way with sprinkles of humour, and then every so often there'll be a line that just really punches you in the gut. Like I said, one of my favourite books of all time, and it made me cry multiple times. I think if you like character-driven contemporary fiction, and if you're interested in a story that shows you why you shouldn't judge people without knowing them, then I would really recommend this one. If you have already read A Man Called Ove and you're looking for a similar recommendation, then the next book on my list might be for you. It's All the Lonely People by Gale, which, like I said, is similar to A Man Called Ove in concept, but the characters and the writing style are different. So this follows a main character called Hubert, who is in his 80s and living in London, but he's originally from Jamaica and was part of the Windrush generation. His daughter lives in Australia, and at the start of the book she announces that she's coming over for a visit, which sends Hubert into action because he has actually actually been lying to his daughter about how much of a social life he has and how lonely he is. She thinks that he's absolutely fine, but the reality is that he barely leaves his house and he barely ever speaks to another human being. So this book is about him trying to live the life that he's told his daughter he's already living. There's also flashbacks to the past where you see him arriving in England from Jamaica and you see all of the racism and the prejudice that he had to deal with. I think I actually recommended a Gale book in my last sad book recommendations video, and he is an author that never fails to make me feel emotional, so I would recommend checking out his books. I haven't read much of his backlist, but I've really enjoyed his recent releases. The final book on my list that I wanted to talk about in this video is The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. So this at the moment is my favourite book that I've read so far this year. I actually talked about this recently in my mid-year book tag, but so far this is my favourite book that I've read so far this year. It made me cry so hard that I couldn't see through the tears to carry on reading. It was that bad. So proceed with caution if you are interested in this book. It's a really difficult book actually to explain because there isn't really much plot. The plot is essentially we're following this guy who is trying to rehome his cat. So they're travelling to visit his various friends and family members to try and find someone who can take in this cat. You do get chapters told from the cat's perspective, which I thought was really cool, and the cat had the personality that you would expect of a cat. She was really sassy and sarcastic, and I just love reading about cats in books. It's not just about this cat though, it's also about this guy and his life. So you do see flashbacks and it was very poignant. I would recommend checking trigger warnings for this one in particular if you need them. It's a very sad book and it did break my heart several times, but yeah, like I said, my favourite book of the year so far, and it's also very short. I'm pretty sure it's less than 250 pages. Okay, if the camera angle has changed, it's because I just had to delete some stuff off my memory card, but that does bring me to the end of this video. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments what are some books that made you cry, and have you read any of the books that I talked about in this video? I didn't talk through any of the fantasy books that have made me cry because quite often the fantasy books that make me cry are often middle or last books in series, and I wasn't sure whether I should recommend series, especially if you'd have to get through a few books before you get to the stuff that's going to make you cry. But yeah, I think that's everything I needed to say. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.